Guys, this is unreal. This is Unreal, and today we finally bring the chicken to life. Previously, we modeled and animated the chicken. This time, we're bringing it into Unreal Engine, setting up the controls, and hooking the animations up to movement. The import itself was easy. Aside from a few checkboxes I had to tick, I also ran into a normal issue in Blender, which caused this weird deformation or see-through or whatever this is. Materials also don't come into Unreal directly, so I had to recreate them to get the feather transparency. Oh, and there was this. This was my first time working with a game engine, and aside from a basic tutorial from Pontypants, who is a huge inspiration for me, I didn't really do much extra learning. I wanted to avoid a tutorial hell and just learn things as I went. At first I tried to figure out how high and how far a chicken could actually jump, and then calculate the camera distance and chicken lengths. But then I was like, meh, I'll just pick something that feels right. It's a game, nobody cares. Then I started working on the controls, which was easier than I thought and harder than I thought at the same time. If you know what you're doing, it's easy, but if you're just starting out, it can be a bit confusing and you might end up wasting a bunch of time. I mean, it moves, it jumps. I'm like 90% done with this game. Alright, let's hook up the animations. Unreal has this nice system where you add character states, and then depending on the state the character is in, a different animation will be played. And after adding a bit of logic, we can tell Unreal how and when to switch between the states. So for example, if the chicken is moving and not in the air, we want it to walk. If it was walking but is not moving anymore, we'd like to see it in the idle pose. I know this is one of the most basic things in game development, but after modeling the chicken from scratch and finally seeing it move, actually feeling like a game, it's just so exciting, like, holy shit. Now, I said adding movement and controls felt a bit harder than expected. One of the reasons for it is that once you add movement, there are a lot of small adjustments you need to make in order for it to feel right. Look at this. This is the Usain Bolt of chickens. It's way too fast. Now, this may seem slow, but it actually feels right. Plus, you won't be walking much anyway. Most of the game is about jumping between platforms, and they are pretty short. So you'll need precision, not speed. And speaking of precision, you might notice there is a bit of acceleration before the chicken reaches full speed, and some deceleration before it stops. This is not what I want. I don't want players falling off ledges because the chicken didn't stop fast enough. I want it to be responsive and snappy. This is supposed to be a precision platformer, so once you learn it, you should feel in control. I also tweaked the transitions a bit, and while doing that, I noticed an issue with the controller. This is actually a pretty new controller, there's nothing wrong with it, but analog sticks almost never rest at a perfect 0, and they're constantly sending tiny signals. I added a dead zone to ignore that, and also scaled it to make it digital. Half push or full push, you move at the same speed. The last adjustment I want to mention is the direction change. It's slow, and if you just tap the control, the chicken ends up half turned. Personal preference, but I also wanted to rotate towards the camera and not away from it. And apparently there's no out-of-the-box way to do all this, so I had to add some extra logic. Not sure if it's the nicest solution, it definitely feels like duct taping things together. Honestly, as a total noob, I thought this would be more automated, like press left, rotate left, done. I guess I was expecting some sort of AI. And as I was saying this, I wondered, what if there is an AI out there? A chicken AI?
Okay, hear me out. What if we did something like 1 and 2 in a phone?
Do you have any chicken?
我没有鸡，我是一个仿生机器。
Cause she's one of a kind and it's so hard to find out. Oh, it's 24/7, she feel like a boy now. Cause she's one of a kind and it's so hard to find out. Oh, it's 24/7.
With no sign of chicken AI, I moved on to the next task, jumping. The current jump node just applies a fixed upward impulse. We need to build some proper arcs depending on how much you charge the jump and the angle you aim at. The charge part was pretty straightforward. The angle though needed a bit more logic and also special handling for the controller. With a mouse, every movement sends a delta, so you have to handle that differently. With a controller, you get values between -1 and 1. Also, some input smoothing was required because it was insanely twitchy at first. Now we have the charge and the angle, but nothing visible happens until we pair it with the animations. For charging, we're going to have this blend space with 2 animations, and depending on the angle, Unreal will just blend between them automatically. I think this is quite cool. The hardest part for me was figuring out the jump. Like I mentioned earlier, I couldn't really use Unreal's default jump node. Yes, there are some settings that can be tweaked, but at the end of the day, it just pushes the character upward and lets the gravity and movement handle the rest. So I switched to the launch character node, which is more flexible and lets me apply force horizontally as well. But even this was not perfect. Let me add a debug line. Okay, see how the jump just cuts off? Even with this out of the way, I struggled to find the right balance between the horizontal and vertical force to get the arcs I wanted. Moreover, as I played with it, I realized that when I do low, long jumps, gravity pulls the chicken down really fast. I mean, I could crank up the horizontal force, but then it just looks weird. Anyway, here's what I ended up doing. Based on the angle value, I created 3 regions. Each region has a minimum and maximum horizontal and vertical launch speed. For each region, I also defined a range of gravity values. The lower the jump angle, the less the gravity pulls the chicken down. So in simple terms, depending on the angle, I pick values for the horizontal speed, vertical speed, but also for the gravity. And then I scaled them based on the jump charge. It took forever. I ended up with a pretty messy function, which I hope to never touch again, but it works. And even with the gravity switching, the jump feels seamless. Now, when I said it works, I didn't mean it like it works. I mean like, it works. You could re-trigger the jump mid-air, even change direction while flying. The animation would just stop at some point, and if you were to ever touch ground, you could just charge your next jump while falling. Nothing crazy, it was simple, but it took a while to find the bugs and then actually fix them. Even after all that, I still had to adjust the jumping and landing animations. I basically added a few blend spaces, similar to what I did for charging. For landing though, I'm using a 2D blend space that takes both landing speed and angle into account. The last changes I want to mention is I added a way for you to cancel a charge in case you change your mind, don't want to jump anymore, or realize you overcharged it. And I also added a full stop whenever you start charging. I'm not 100% committed to this one, but I think it's the right call. This is a game about precision, so the moment you want to jump, you stop, you focus, you feel the fear that you might mess it up, and then the amplified disappointment and frustration if you actually do.